Hi friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm East Forest. This week I'm coming to you with an episode with Born Eye. So Born Eye is the artist that I released a track with this last Friday, the 17th of July, 2020. And he's a Washington, D.C. based hip-hop, EDM artist, and also a meditation teacher. I believe in the lineage of like Jack Kornfield and Spirit Rock. And just an all-around cool guy, and I was really psyched that we got to be able to link up. He did a rendition of a song that he wrote called I Can't Breathe. That's very, very stirring work, and he did a version of it on Instagram where he was just rapping it over singing bowls, crystal bowls. Crystal bowls, yeah. Which is not something you normally see people flowing rhymes over. And it was actually like really cool. It wasn't just like weird. It was really cool. I was like, wow, that sounds cool, and I've never seen that before. So we started chatting, and I just asked him if he'd be gracious enough to let me take a hand at reworking the track or remixing it. He said yes, so he put down just the bowls on one track and then his rapping on another track, and then I pulled that into the old session and started playing around with it, and we made it into this collaborative track. So I Can't Breathe, the East Forest rework, is out on all streaming platforms now, including Bandcamp, which you can get to over at eastforest.org or music.eastforest.org. And thank you for supporting the work and supporting Born Eye. He's just a really cool artist, and I've enjoyed our burgeoning friendship together. So that's out everywhere you want to see it, and I'll play it at the end of this podcast as well, so you can get a taste of it, but you can hear it in its full glory. The best place to hear the best fidelity is at eastforest.org on the Bandcamp page, where you can get it in high res. I want to thank Maria Gauthier for donating the graphic design on that, and it was mastered by Jared Hirschland. Yeah, so we got into this conversation. We talk about the creation of that, but really just got all into him, and we talk about music and race, and how that comes up in the music industry. And we talk about some meditation ideas. And I thought it was a fantastic conversation. So I think you're really going to enjoy this. Thank you for everyone who tuned in for the online ceremony, the live stream ceremony that happened on July 18th, 2020. It's still up on YouTube and also on Facebook. I streamed it simultaneously over there. And it'll be up for a couple weeks if you want to watch it in full. It won't be up forever. Probably just truncate it down to some clips because it wasn't intended to be something that is like an ongoing offering. It was meant to be live. It was meant to be something that we gathered together, and it was amazing to have that energy again of us gathering all around the world and hearing your stories about that. So if you want to continue to tell us what that experience was like, thanks for the messages you've sent so far, but you can do that on social media, so not only I see it, but we can share it as a community. Just tag East Forest or East Forest Music, and we'd love to hear, like, what was it like going through the virtual ceremony together? What did you go through? What are you facing? What are you working with these days? Because oftentimes when one person tells their story, we feel our solidarity because we see that it's a shared human condition usually. And we're all going through a lot of similar things, like different flavors, but a lot of the core things as we go through these transformations and challenges that we're facing in the COVIDian time, but also as that comes along with it, all the other change, both social and cultural, economic, all the different things. It cuts deep. So, yeah, if you missed it, you can still check it out. And this was the fourth online ceremony. And it has its pros and cons for me, but one of the main pros is that I get to share it with all of you, and we get to expand things into this digital realm. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah, so thanks for giving the podcast a review. We had a couple reviews come in on Apple Podcasts. I got this real fun one from Dev Waltz. It says, love, 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 5 stars. East Forest has a podcast? What? Why am I so late to the party? Thoroughly enjoying these conversations. Just love the one with Sophia Rockland. Love the topics and his way of interviewing. Thank you so much for doing this. Well, you're welcome. Thank you for giving a review, and thank you for you, those of you who have given reviews, and you can do it again. I know you can give the 5-star thing more than once, and those ratings they really help. They help guests that I'm reaching out to say yes. It's this quantification world we're in, which is a crazy thing. But I appreciate it, and I also appreciate you guys who've been sharing the podcast on social media. Like if you have an episode you like or you make a clip, you can share a clip of it. It's just fun, and it kind of makes the conversation get bigger than just me and a guest. It's bringing you guys into it too, and seeing what comes up for you. So thanks for giving it a review, and thanks for doing it right now if you can while I'm gibbering and jabbering. This week, I have a birthday in a couple days, which tomorrow, or the day this is coming out, the 21st, is when my birthday is, and I'm excited about that. So I'm going to have a nice fun day with Rada. It's always hot on my birthday since I've been a kid, and it's going to be a hot one here. We're in Boise, Idaho at the moment. So I think we're going to get down to the river and down to the water and do some other fun things. But I've also been doing, now you can fast forward if you want to skip to the interview with Bornai, but I want to tell you about an experience I had recently in a ketamine therapy group. It's totally legal ketamine therapy. Rada has started leading group ketamine therapy, which is a new thing. There's a ketamine clinic called the Boise Ketamine Clinic, which is something that's popping up in a lot of cities, various forms of ketamine, particularly as a form to help mitigate treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, and other situations that people are facing. And she started working with the woman who's running this, Nicole, and she's running like these group sessions. So we're doing them with masks and staying apart, and we've got the window open and the fan blowing air out the window, all the things we can do. And the first 2 sessions were pretty mellow for me, and then the third session, I'm not really sure why, but I had an incredibly profound and deep experience, and it was sort of like it was like my mind or my thinking consciousness. Let's call that like the top of the ocean, the surface, where the storms are, and where we run the boats, and where we drop poles into the water and do all the things we do in life. And as the experience deepened, I was going down, and that layer was always still there of like my thinking consciousness and my identity. But the deeper I got, the more I started dropping into sort of what I was describing as the I am consciousness. I am, and just sort of source beingness. And it was a very, very comforting place. It's a psychedelic place, but technically ketamine's not a psychedelic. It's, I believe, more than analgesic, dissociative. But I bring this up because I had this notion that kind of came to me in that space, that it feels like we're being birthed by God or the universe or source. We're being birthed. And when I had that idea of almost like it's motherly, it's like we're being midwifed into a new being. Now, not just as individuals, but also all of humanity. And when I had that notion, we've used the birth metaphor before to talk about what's happening, how it's bloody and violent and dark and you don't know what's happening, but out of it comes new life. But to remember the fact that there's a mother involved, and that motherly energy of sort of holding you and helping you and midwifing that process. And if you are being birthed from God or the universe, you can't be outside of it. It's sort of these circles within circles within circles, but it's sort of, the lens of a baby, or the lens of new life, the tenderness of that, and the process of that, and the birthing process. When you think about it on a societal, the whole civilization scale, it's crazy, but it was comforting. And so when I was in that space, I was sort of sensing that momentum and that occurring now. And it was just something that came up, and I wanted to share it with you as an analogy, as something for you to sit with and just take it or leave it. And the whole thing was like 20 minutes. It's crazy. It's just like you go into these deep spaces, and I felt like I did some really good work, personal work, and then came back, and it's brought a lot of calm to me. And that's been helpful for me just to operate in my life with my interpersonal relationships and the work that I'm doing and the stuff that's going on. So there's a lot going on. And so anything you can do to help with anxiety, and for me, depression, anxiety is always stuff I'm working with. That's kind of why I do East Forest, or why it all started, was this exploration of how to work with those energies that come up, the human condition itself being so challenging, and looking for answers. So just want to let you know about that. If there's any more interesting things that come up, I'll share them with you. So let's get into this conversation with Born I.
Where it's simple to lynch blacks, drinking all alone on the stoop, and I sit back, trying to see the brightness in the world, but it's pitch black. Words from the Savior, love your neighbor is intact.
So I need to get a little background before I get into the more nuanced questions.
Sure.
You're in DC.
Yeah.
Give us a little background about who you are and where you are, so we can get the playing field here.
Okay, cool. So, my name is Born I. I was born Ofosu Jones Quarte. I also respond to that name. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. My family heritage is Ghanaian. My family's from Ghana in West Africa, but I'm a first-generation American. I am a hip-hop and electronic music rapper and vocalist. I guess now I'm also a singing bowl rapper. and I have also been teaching mindfulness and meditation to kids and parents and teens and adults for over 10 years now. So yeah, that's it. Does that work?
Yeah, totally. It's so what we got linked together, I think partially because our mutual friend Vivek thought that you have a fairly interesting intersection of interests. I mean, I would say namely hip hop and meditation or mindfulness, whatever you want to call it, is not something. I bet that's actually more common than you think. It's just not at the forefront of the artist, their work itself publicly, and that is relatively unique. And I also have a mixture of interests that are not the usual music kind of thing, and so that's why we had that crossover. And we were going to chat about, just to say hi, and you did you kind of had some rapping over some singing bowls, and I saw that on Instagram, and I thought that was definitely unique. It's not something I'd ever seen before, and moreover, I thought it was just a really interesting mixture of what you were rhyming about against the tones of singing bowls. And I think I messaged you and said that typically singing bowls are pretty bad. People. I don't mean the bowls themselves. Well, actually, they're actually a really intense instrument, right? It's a very strong sound. I actually don't own any. I don't.
Really?
Yeah, and if they're in a room and I'm doing some kind of more meditation thing, occasionally I'll use them, but very sparingly, because it's such a strong tone. It's loud.
It is.
It's really. It's kind of like an awakening. Whoa, depending on the bowl. And so, usually, with all respect to other human beings out there, the kind of people who are doing things with singing bowls are not exactly, shall we say, of the highest taste. Their taste is not usually great. And thank God you weren't rapping about dolphins and seagulls. And not at all. It's this song called "I Can't Breathe" that sadly I believe you wrote back with the Garner, right? 5 years ago, whenever that was.
5 years ago, yeah.
And it sounded like you wrote it last week. It's horrible. And so we've been messing around with that. So how did this happen? That you're DC hip hop, and then you're bringing in these elements that don't come from hip hop, aren't necessarily part of hip hop.
Yeah, so there are long and short answers to this, and I'll try to land in the middle.
We got time.
My dad my parents are who I credit with giving me this sort of unique approach to music and to life. My dad was and is such an avid fan of music and of multiple genres of music. And so I grew up listening to anything from Brazilian jazz to hip hop to avant-garde jazz to Ghanaian high life music and reggae and R&B. And so and my dad was not just a casual fan; he was an avid fan, and so he'd always have history lesson to go on with how these music disciplines came together internationally, or the context between a John Coltrane record and what that meant in relationship to his time with Miles Davis.
Did he play? Your father
No,
was
that was the thing.
just
My dad is
enthusiast.
such a music enthusiast, but it was like growing up with a musician.
Wow.
That's how intense his love of music is, and how deep his knowledge of music is. Now, my mom and my dad is also a very highly intelligent person, and knows how to make these sort of obscure connections between society, art, and the present moment, and all those types of things. So I was getting that kind of education from him. My mom had begun to practice yoga and Buddhism as a way to help her navigate the all the uncertainty that came from being an immigrant here in America.
You grew up outside DC, or
I
you
grew up
moved there?
I grew up right outside DC. I grew up in a town called Silver Spring,
Mm-hmm.
but I was born in DC, grew up in Silver Spring, and then I went to high school and college in DC, and then lived around the area after that. And so I was going to yoga studios and temples with my mom and learning how to
Mm.
chant and all this type of stuff. And she and I are extremely close. I'm an only child, so she and I are very, very close. And so I was learning about Eastern spirituality through her. And I was also getting this huge music education through my dad. And those two things have continued to inform my life going forward. And even though my mom introduced me to Buddhism, my parents did not really ask me to be any one particular religion or to have a particular spirituality. So I had a pretty flexible time exploring what spirituality and religion meant to me. And I had deeply intense relationships with different spiritual traditions over time. And then when I was in college and my wife, my now wife, then girlfriend, was pregnant with our first child, Sundara, something about that moment called me back to my, and I don't know, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita and I was reading about the Dalai Lama, and then all of a sudden, and I felt very compelled to dig in deeper, and as it related to my past with my mom. And then all of a sudden I was about to be a parent, and I felt that I was called back to the Eastern paths, as you might say, through being a new dad. And
Mm.
all my music has always had this like spiritual underpinning or reflectiveness. And so, yeah, influenced by people like Wu-Tang Clan, who I think were like some of the first people using Wu-Tang Clan, Jeru the Damager, Afu Ra, Brand Nubian, Nas, all these people who had this this spiritual dimension to their hip hop. I'm heavily influenced by those people, so it all kind of came together. So that's I could go longer, but that's
Sure. No, that's helpful. And yeah, it seems like hip hop today versus hip hop in particularly the 90s and late
Mhm.
90s. I don't know about you, but I feel like it kind of went through its apex in the late 90s. That's my favorite era of
Yeah,
hip hop for
yeah,
sure. It's changed in the last while where I mean, in some ways, it's some of the most forward-thinking forms of music out there because they're really experimenting.
yeah.
But some of those experiments, I'm just like, there was a couple years ago, I was like, is this music? It's like there was some of that stuff that was really like monotone and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
super minimalist, and I was like, huh, I mean, I like that they're trying stuff. but I'm a
Yeah,
fan of groove,
I
but
I know. I totally hear you. I think I relate. You know what's funny is that I relate more to the '90s expression of hip hop, but I kind of sonically enjoy hip hop today more. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I was just it. I don't know.
it's very creative. I
It's
have to say, like and it's also one of the what's the word? It's like it's making them more some of the most money. It's like
yeah,
so. I mean, because of that, there's incredible amount of interest, and it's crazy, like what people are doing. It's
yeah.
innovation, right?
I think part of my drive, part of why my music intersects also at hip hop and electronic music is that I always wanted to. I started out rapping as a hip hop artist and drum and bass MC. So I've always done hip hop and electronic music together. And but I also developed this like there's this show on YouTube called Great Mythical Morning that my second born loves to watch, and they always try to make some experiment like will will it burrito, and they'll try to make a burrito out of something. So I guess, but in that vein, I'm always like, will it hip hop, and I'll just always try to just rap over anything. Beethoven, will it hip hop, dubstep, will it hip hop, house music, will it hip hop, singing bowls, will it hip hop, and 99% of the time it will, and that's
Right.
that's the beauty and the adaptability of rap, and at least as far as I see it. Yeah.
Well, it's not, there's no beat there. So, I mean, it also speaks to your own ability to do that. There's like an internal rhythm you have to be comfortable with.
Mm.
When you sent me, because I've been, just for the listeners know, we'll try and release this podcast hopefully when that track we've been working on comes
Word.
out. But you sent me just the vocal and singing bowl. So, what's actually hard about that for you is you're not really rapping to a particular strong beat, which
Yeah.
usually gets the cadence going,
Yeah.
and it matched up really well, like the flow and the timing of it. But that's not so easy to do. Some people need the kind of, like, what kind of beat is it?
Yeah.
For instance, you had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I am blessed in that coming from being an African kid and listening to so many polyrhythmic expressions when I was
Yeah,
growing up, and then also coming from the the 90s rap ethos of like being able to like just to be able to spit 16 bars and to know what that is, to develop this mathematical sequencing in your mind about how to lay lyrics down, that I became I was working with a group of artists for whom that was very important, that our bars were intact and they were tight and they were just and they
so great. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
great skill, man, just to be tight.
I mean, that's the thing about John Coltrane. He was so tight that he could then become loose, and that's
Yeah,
yeah. That's
dude,
that.
in college, I had a friend who was studying piano with someone who basically was Lenny Tristano's protege. I know that's a lot of steps, and I was kind of take lessons from my friend, really simple lessons. And the lesson was just you play one note at a time on the piano going up the scale, each one at 60 beats per minute, so one per second. I mean,
Mm,
how boring does it get?
yeah.
And then after you get that, you go to the minor scale, and then you go to the next scale, and then you notch it up to 61 beats per minute.
Yeah.
And the guy put the metronome on the piano, and he said to my friend, who was white, he says, "This metronome will make you black," meaning a compliment to say, like, this will give you good time, and
Yeah.
time is everything. Like, if you
Yeah.
get good timing, you can't skip that.
No, no,
And
no, no,
then
no.
and then like learn all the complicated chords. Like, you got to get your timing down in your bones and your body, because everything springs from there.
Yeah, it does have to be essentially just, yeah, like you said, in your bones and in your body. And I am fortunate enough to have the bones and body of a rhythmic person.
And
And
you shed it. It sounds like, for a long time. I mean,
yeah.
you kind of practiced
Oh,
that rhythmic stuff.
for sure. Yeah, it wasn't just enough of just being born that way. Yeah, it just that is just how I learned how to approach writing lyrics. When we were when we were kids, and you had people who were masters of deviation from the standard. So you have
Yeah.
people who are masters of the format. People like Black Thought
Hmm.
and Common and AZ are masters of the bricklaying of bars. And then you have virtuosos like Nas who can stay within structure, but then do these very very poetic deviations that are just that's why he was so amazing, because this is not a. I used to look at rappers and be like, okay, I'm going to learn how to crack this formula of how they're writing, and there were people that I just could never crack. You can't. I couldn't crack, but so many rappers I did crack, and I don't want to say names, but at least in my imagination, I had cracked their
Yeah.
their barcode.
Style.
Yeah, and but I'll give a homage to people whose code I could never crack: Nas, Jay-Z, Busta Rhymes. Even though it appears that you might be able to get Busta Rhymes, you cannot, because he's elusive. And
He's a
then
wild man. Yeah.
yes, Ghostface.
Do you know Master Ace? I mean, he wasn't a huge rapper.
Yeah,
He's a
I
New
know.
York rapper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Master Ace was amazing. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Master Ace, Last Emperor, those kind of guys, those were super dope. And
Talib, Most Def. Were you into those guys at all?
I was into Mos Def a little bit more than Talib, but I love Reflection Eternal, and I loved um um oh gosh, the first album that they did. Well, the only album that they did together. Yeah,
Black Star.
Black Star,
Yeah.
and man, I must have knocked that Black Star album.
Yeah, that's a great album. That's a great
That's one of the
album.
most classic albums
Yeah.
ever. I think they're coming out to do another
What
one.
about, Tribe, all that stuff? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, so it's an amazing intersection and timing. I mean, it kind of is all about that with when you listen to a lot of those artists and like, but you also had if this thing going on with EDM and electronic music, and kind of combining it. It's funny because a lot of hip hop has been moving in that direction with like
yeah,
trap sounds,
yeah.
and it's kind of blurring genres. And then the funny thing is that country music has been picking up hip hop stuff.
No.
I think they see the dollar signs, but like,
It's hip hop's just this universally adaptable, ever evolving, driven by
yeah,
young genius minds thing. But in EDM, it's the same kind of thing. And I always felt like these two genres, these two audiences need to be having more of a conversation with one another, because there's like a cultural disconnect, I think, in the EDM community and the hip hop community between one another. There's like this suspicion. At least there used to be, that
yeah,
they were just kind of suspicious of one another and one another's intentions. You're coming into, and I know I experienced that. Like veiled racism and general musical suspicion working in electronic music. Depending on which genre, you get more of it than the other. House music, as a rapper, they're like, please stay the fuck over there. Even though I've made some amazing house records, but I don't think they feel that way about me anymore. I think I've proven myself, but still, I mean, the looks and the microaggressions and the funny shit that people say and do. And then, in hip hop also, you just have some of my hip hop contemporaries that are just like, I'm just not trying to hear any of that boop doop 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 shit, and like, and and none of that, and that does not. It's like it doesn't count when I do EDM, and some of my colleagues and friends on the hip hop side hear it. It doesn't count to them. Even my bars could be amazing, and also it's just like, okay, that's just something that you did over there. Give me I need this concept, and
but
similarly,
you're blurring the two a lot of
I'm
the time. So what
yeah,
happens
yeah.
then? I mean, if is neither camp being pleased, or they?
I I think that it's a long game that I've been playing where it's
Hmm.
like I've just been wanting to demonstrate that these worlds are not mutually exclusive and that we can blur the lines for a greater musical conversation and a greater cultural effect. And I think people are seeing that more now. So but I think it's easier to blur the lines now than it even was 2-3 years ago, where it was just like, this has to be dubstep. This has to be. I think now you're getting dubstep. You're getting little micro dubstep moments. Now, Jay-Z and Kanye were doing this dub hop stuff on Watch the Throne, but I think it kind of went over people's heads but you're starting to see, these intersecting trends. So I feel good. I feel like I'm in a good spot with it,
So tell me more about some of the things you said you experienced. You called it micro racism when you were trying to break into these other genres, probably particularly, I mean, the house scene, the electronic scene. You go to these festivals. Actually, even really the wellness scene is largely white.
Yeah.
And there's a class divide, in there too, typically, because in order to be out spending money on retreats and stuff, you probably have to have some extra money and time. And that's a deeper conversation that I'm curious about your experience with, because I think it's a conversation that isn't had much, or there isn't much insight into what that's like.
Yeah, in the wellness, in both spaces, in the wellness space and in the sort of pioneering space of being not just like a marginalized add-on to a song, but a real part of different musical cultures. Yeah, I definitely have had my fair share of. See, the thing about a microaggression is that it can come in the form of just this felt sense that you're not welcome, and it could also come in the form of people actually making you feel not welcome, or you step into the booth and then the DJ or and the promoter are looking at you like, oh, shouldn't you be like hanging my coat or some shit? Like, no, motherfucker, I'm the headliner. And just stuff like that. It's I mean, I've had experiences where people just outright made me feel unwelcome and uncomfortable. And then sometimes the things that people say when they are okay. So like, I was at a festival, and someone came up to me, and it was hot as shit. And someone came up to me and was like, "Does being black make you naturally hotter?" And I was like, "Well, how could you? First of all, how would I know? How would I know any fucking different?
Right.
Secondly, what the fuck kind of thing is that to ask a person? And
That's just stupid.
it's just the dumbest shit. But it's like you would be surprised the level of comfort people have saying racially insensitive shit once they put like some blow and Molly in their face and start drinking.
I can definitely believe that scene is rife with stupidity.
For sure.
Self-importance.
For sure, and and I'm not immune to stupidity and self-importance either. But as far as being on the receiving end of some bullshit, so flipping it to on the wellness side, I was teaching at a secular mindfulness studio here in Bethesda, which is a pretty white area, and I would always. It was something that I enjoyed sometimes, like just sitting in the corner, and then people coming in for the first time, and there's like, okay, oh, and then they're like, yep, this is your instructor, and just seeing the eyebrows raise. But sometimes people would be, but most of the time, folks would be like, oh, okay, wasn't expecting that, but let's give it a shot, but sometimes you would get some people who were visibly agitated, and and would make would make funny comments like, are your tattoos a part of or just asking me about my appearance as it relates to me being a teacher and what I had on, and just this like veiled, just like, I don't like you, I don't want you to be my teacher kind of stuff. The lack of, and then me trying to talk about that with the with the people who were running the studio, and them feeling like I was just making it up, which is something that people of color go through a lot. Where
Making it up, really.
yeah,
I mean, if it's your experience, it's your experience. You know.
one would think, but a lot of people
Yeah.
feel like it's just in your imagination, and and that is really painful for people to basically be like, you're crazy, and it's like, no, I know what I'm experiencing. In the you are absolutely right also about the wellness space being traditionally prohibitive towards lower income people and people of color rising up to hold positions of prominence. I was fortunate enough to start teaching in a program that was kind of off to the side, the family program, and at the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, and Tara Brock, who runs that organization, she and I, became close friends, and she always vouched for me and encouraged my teaching career. But I was taught meditation in a traditional sense from a Buddhist monk. My teacher, Bhante Buddharakkhita, taught me Vipassana, but that way of being traditionally taught does not check the boxes of a certification program. You know what I mean? That costs
Right.
thousands of dollars. And so there are some great scholarship things happening right now, and I just got a scholarship to take a really fantastic program. But I've never been able to. Prior to now, I'd never been able to take one of those like big certification things, but I think I'm a pretty good teacher. I was taught in a traditional sense, and I've been doing it for a while. But many other Black teachers have the same experience, and there's a wall that they can't get past because I don't have 2 months to take this thousands of dollar course, to be certified in the eyes of, the wider public. So there are systemic issues that are there as well.
Well, I hear two things going on. And one is that if you don't feel welcomed into any new group, let's just speaking about race, it's going to be really hard to have those people. It's going to be hard to diversify your world.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about allowing those people in, bringing them in, inviting them in, whatever it is. Like, yeah, but if they're there and there's a background sense that I'm not fitting in or people don't want me here, they're not going to want to be there.
Yeah.
It's just about being comfortable. And then the second side is more, we're talking about, particularly in the wellness world, about affluence. And that's a big issue, just sort of about spiritual bypass in the sense of like, what's the work really going on here? And like, if we're not including everyone, then we're sort of missing the point.
Yeah.
And so in the music world, I would say in some ways, the fact that you're doing what you're doing, despite it not always being ideal or comfortable or even invited, you are taking the initiative to break down what's standing in the way between both of us, between all these different races and people and classes. But I wish there was more work going on the other side. And that's not something, to be honest, I thought about much. Like when I'm thinking, like if I don't produce festivals, but if I did, that's sort of like active outreach you'd be doing to say that you'd have to do that to kind of, because it's not going to happen on its own.
Yeah.
Really, or very, very slowly. People like you are an anomaly. As we started this conversation, like there aren't a lot of people crossing those bridges of genres and ideas.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to my parents, they were just, my family has this very unique backstory on many, many levels. And so I sort of just grew up with being anomalous as something that's sort of normalized, for an African woman to be practicing yoga and Buddhism at that time was definitely not something that people were used to seeing. And my dad was a very like progressive thinker, and he was what's called a Pan-Africanist. So he ascribed to the idea that all African people are essentially, one people. We're not monolithic, but that we should think about anyone from who is of African descent as being a part of the wider African family. So that means African. So because there are a lot of cultural splits amongst Africans and African Americans. Traditionally, there have been. I think that's getting less today. But my Kwame Nkrumah, the father of like African independence, of colonialism, he ascribed to this Pan-Africanist philosophy, and my dad did as well. And so he was always like, find the points of intersection, find the points where people can come together, find the points where people can agree. And yeah, I think that I am willing to navigate ignorance, because to get to my ultimate goal of expressing unity through art and wellness, because ignorance, while it hurts and can be dangerous, is still an illusion. It's not reality, and so and so I choose to engage with people's ignorance in a way that that can be exhausting, but I don't let it stop me from pursuing the ultimate goal. Does that make sense?
I think this is a really important point, and I want you to speak more about this, because a lot of what's happening lately on social media with the Black Lives Matter movement is that there isn't much patience. The patience you're speaking that you have for what is quickly seen as a form of virtue signaling, which I understand, but at the same time, when you say like it's like it's an illusion, right? It is. Right?
Yeah.
And these are these meta ideas, these meta spiritual ideas that are true. But I can also hear how they can sting, because it's like, but it hurts.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear that bullshit that you're telling me it's an illusion,
Yeah.
And so I actually am appreciating you giving voice to that, because they're both true.
Yes.
And it's difficult to navigate this charged space right now, because I can also understand like when there isn't room yet to speak to this. It's like we have more work to do just listening. We have more work to do of just of catharsis, in a sense, of hundreds of years of backup. So it's like, I get that. But you are working and talking about a very special space of how these spiritual ideas can apply to healing, can apply to this situation.
Yeah, so it moves into Buddhist philosophy for me, and different philosophies about the nature of self, and in Tibetan Buddhism, or in the specifically in the Madhyamaka school of Vajrayana Buddhism, you have this concept of the two truths. That you have the relative and the absolute, and that they are inseparable. And both experiences are entirely valid, but to be the truest expression of a living being, you have to find your way to the middle, and find this creative way to navigate both expressions of reality. And so, you're like, exactly. I mean, the ignorance of racism stings so much that it has caused untold tragedy and devastation. It also is not a fixed, immovable idea or concept that we have to engage with as if it is made of stone. It's something that can be examined and uprooted and transformed. And that's the same with our own with everyone's what's called fundamental ignorance, of just us not seeing reality in the right way. and so it really, when you sit down to meditate, it requires, or when you're practicing mindfulness or whatever, there's a little bit of bravery, because like, shit, I don't know what I'm about to encounter here, but all right, let's do it. And it's the same sort of thing when working with society. It's like we all have to be brave enough to approach the uncomfortable situations, but then have enough wisdom to know that these are not immovable objects. We can change them. And the real impediment to our happiness is our ignorance about one another, our own selves, etc.
Oh, I love that idea. The impediments to our happiness is to rise above the ignorance, not just so to make someone else happy. It's like our own happiness. The
Yeah.
way that Maya and illusion is stopping us from seeing that or experiencing that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a stronger motivation for an anti-racist argument than just to be like shaming someone to be like, that's what you need to do
Yeah.
because you're inherently racist. It's like, ouch. How about like then we can all be happy, including you? And it's like a secret path.
It's all of this is for, like, I try to, when I'm talking to anybody these days, about, and actually about anything on the topic of spirituality or growth, I'm just like, why do any of us do anything? Ultimately we want to be happy. That's we want some sense of fulfillment. We want some sense of ease, and we have different ways of going about it, but we all share that common goal for the most part, and I think if we have an end game in our minds to say that we are protesting inequality and protesting racism and protesting any of the things that we're protesting so that we can all be happier, not just so that these things become dismantled for the sake of dismantling them. I would love to feel easeful and peaceful and well wherever I go.
Peace. Yeah. That's like such a powerful world. I mean, it seems that the process, if you look at it through the lens of it's a therapeutic process, and therapeutic processes of grief and contain many emotions.
Yeah.
Anger being one of them, but we're moving through something that it cuts so deep that and in such complicated, pervasive ways through an entire society.
Yeah.
That we shouldn't expect it to be an easy fix or an easy conversation because we all have our own forms of ignorance.
Yeah.
And even me speaking about it is me saying like I don't know I don't. I think one thing that's important is our intent.
Yeah.
Where do I want to go with it? What am I trying to do? That's kind of where every journey starts from.
I totally agree, and I think the three most honest words anyone could ever say, I would hope, are "I love you," but usually it's "I don't know."
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think that's how we make these significant steps towards creating a better world, is by saying, I don't know how to do it, and but then, like you say, I intend to be of better service to humanity, and then we take responsibility for how to educate ourselves in doing so, and we don't necessarily put the burden on others to educate us, but we just take stock of the situation, and we go, and I also think that the going back to we're talking about music, there have been years where I felt like, man, did I fuck my career up by doing this deep exploration of electronic music
I know that feeling. Yeah. By being too many things. Yeah.
Yeah, and are the worlds that I operate in too diametrically opposed, for me to make any impact whatsoever? Have I? But I was like, man, these things, they matter to me, and I'm just gonna keep at it. And then all of a sudden, it just starts to gel. It starts to make sense, and so being committed to playing the long game with any meaningful endeavor, I think is crucial. And so with this conversation that we're having about race and this action on it, I love the quick action items that we can make here, posts on social media, demonstrations, tearing down racist statues and making laws that can be made right now that can affect some change. But we need to have this, when you're talking about something systemic, there's got to be a commitment to like continuing to have this conversation for years, and that's what I hope to see, that we didn't have this moment of upheaval and change, but we need systemic change, and that requires much
commitment.
more commitment is the word. Yeah. and stamina and endurance and willingness. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I think we're in a process of a snake shedding its skin, like meaning like all of humanity, and it reaches all aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
And I think one of the challenges of the movement right now is that we have a lot going on. We have a pandemic that's tearing down. I mean, I really believe it's related personally. I feel like it created a kind of pressure on many aspects of society, and that's part of the reason we're getting a big response. It's just like had enough, economic pressures and people being out of work and no real leadership and all the things.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to chew gum and walk at the same time. And it's like we need to continue this conversation, and we have a lot to deal with all at once. It's like, man, I just can't. That's what's so overwhelming. I don't know how you've been feeling, that some days I feel strong and some days I'm just like, this is a lot that we're all personally and collectively dealing with all at once. I really feel that more is to come. A lot more is to come.
Yeah.
This is a long journey.
A long journey indeed. And there was a moment where I was stress buying, stress drinking, stress eating, just doing a bunch of stress. And then I started to notice that I would have these existential crises after I drink coffee. And I couldn't understand. And then for the rest of the day, I would be so pressurized inside, just after a morning cup of coffee. But it was just that little bit of caffeine stimulation and opened up the floodgates to how truly anxious and overwhelmed I was underneath all of this. And this was in the early days of the pandemic and the beginning of lockdown. And then some days you'd just be so damn tired. Your system is so completely fried. And I had to take a different approach to my meditation practice. I had to start practicing I changed my posture so that it wasn't it wasn't asking so much of me to maintain for long periods of time. I usually would sit in half lotus, but now I've been sitting in this like modified half, and which is just a small change, but it really made sitting easier for me. And I just started trying to be more deliberately kind to myself, and more gentle with myself as things were, because it is such an overwhelming time. And
is it harder as a father because if you're thinking about, you said you had 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
And it's, it must be on your mind about the world that's becoming for your children that you can't control. And like, what kind of skills, how much of that do you take on?
I mean, it is, there's a line in this Japanese samurai treatise called the Hagakure that says that, if you accept from the outset that when it rains, you're going to get wet, you won't be troubled when you do get wet. Something like that. It was much more poetic than that, but
shit happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll smell shit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. One of my teachers said, yeah, if you walk in the mud, you're bound to get shit on your boots. So it's like I know that there's no way that I could protect them from the vicissitudes of human existence. All I can do is continue to try to be like a real stumbling, like clumsy example of trying to get it right, and share with them, what I've learned over time, and our my it's the principles, the values that I have are about wisdom and compassion, like try to see things the way that they really are, and and as you see them, try to have compassion for yourself and for others. Those are like the two guiding principles that I try to impart to them, because I mean those are broad enough strokes that can encompass most of what they will in life. And I think it's important for me to also say that I and your mother are always here to be a refuge for you. When you go out into the world, you're not alone. And my oldest daughter was having a tough day, and I don't know the words. You're not alone. You're not alone. I'm here with you. They were powerful for me to say. I hope it landed powerfully for her also. But it reminded me that is an important thing that we need to. That as a parent, I can share with my kids that you'll never be alone as long as I'm alive. But there are going to be times where you're facing things, essentially by yourself, and using the eye of wisdom to try to see things for what they are and not for what they appear to be, and trying to remember that all of us want to be happy and want to avoid suffering, and try to see through that compassionate lens. Let those things be what guides your life. But it's hard to do that in the Instagram era and the pandemic era, and just. But I mean, I don't think parenting has ever been easy, but it's especially challenging right now. Yeah.
Well, especially when you have 4 kids.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
How old are they?
How
old are
I have, man, we just had birthdays, so I'm trying to remember. Okay. So,
well, I won't know if you're wrong.
No. Oh, so, that's true.
But your kids will.
17, 15, 4, 17, 15, wow. Fuck. 17, 15, 7, and 4. Yeah, I had my.
That's a wide spread.
It is. All of childhood is happening in my house at the same time.
God. Yeah. Wow, man.
I had my first kid when I was still in school. So so we kind of the first and second ones happened pretty early for my wife and I, but we all kind of grew up together, then took a big break, and then I don't know, just for some reason I was about to be home free. They're about to be able to take care of themselves, and then we were just like, why don't we throw 2 more in there? So
you're a wild man.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me, but they're awesome. Well, so
yes, and I try to think about that. The world is really volatile, but that also is an indication of how much possibility it's going through.
There you go.
Now, we have infinite possibilities, and it's probably going to be a bit of both, in the sense that it's going to be some really hard things, but there's the possibility for incredible new beginnings that we haven't even imagined yet that are going to happen inevitably. It's all part of the picture.
Yeah.
And the kind of kids that are incarnating into life now, it's like, talk about brave souls, because their agents of change by being willing to go through the fire. Like, they can't escape the fire, but the only way for us to make the transformation is for beings to go through it and to make choices going through it that will create that change by challenges facing us. And we're seeing it now, and there's more to come.
It's that is profoundly stated, and something I definitely agree with. The only way to change it is to go through it. And they are incredibly brave souls. The whole new spectrum of human being coming into the world and emerging and coming of age, all of the above. My 2 oldest kids were adamant that we attend the protests happening in the area here, and that they would take whatever protective measures afterwards to not get grandparents sick and and that sort of thing. But this was not something that they were going to
Miss.
miss.
Yeah.
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 And their understanding of the issues and their grasp is more than I had a grasp on when I was a kid, So,
Yeah. Right.
yeah. So I think, I mean, I am eternally optimistic about, well, just because the kids that I've worked with in my teaching life and what I see when I, for all of the uncomfortable moments that I've experienced entering new communities and new genres in music, those are fewer and farther in between than the real moments of genuine connection and just the beauty of human beings that I've experienced as I've traveled around the world and interacted with so many people. I'm way more hopeful in the people's power to persist in further awakening than not. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess you could argue that that is what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what this process is. It's a form of awakening
Mm.
and healing wounds and shedding layers and burning through the things we don't need anymore. I
For
don't know
sure.
how else. I don't know how else it can happen. To be honest, it's not like it's probably going to be a little ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people, that's the idea of like, ego identity is this illusory thing that people hold on to very much so. And as we have a collective social ego identity that is going through an ego death right now. So, and that shit is not fun.
No. Just to wrap this up, I'm curious if in the process of your own, it sounds like you kind of was baked in as a kid, this diverse viewpoint you had from music and culture. But did psychedelics ever play a role in helping you on that path? Because I know that's also not as prevalent in people of color
Yeah.
or Black communities. Like anytime I've been in healing circles, again, just like the wellness world,
Yeah.
pretty white,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's a big blind spot of the psychedelic therapeutic movement. Is like, how does this opportunity, what value and how does it speak to people who aren't asking for
Yeah. Yeah.
it? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, in my experience, there is more. Okay, so I let's go back to the first question. So I have had some very significant experiences with psychedelics, particularly with mushrooms and ayahuasca, and um, and I think that we are seeing a rise in people of color engaging in the use of psychedelics as well. And I think what it always has been is that people of color have always kind of still been doing the same things that white people have been doing, but just in spaces that are separate because they haven't necessarily felt welcome in predominantly white spaces. And that's what I found to be true. I thought, yeah, and on all sorts of ways of that being true, I found that to be the case often, but that's just speaking to my own experience. So I think so. Yeah. So my experience with ayahuasca was an incredibly profound experience, and also with mushrooms when I was younger. I just found that there was this culture of kind of like abusing psychedelics. You know what I mean? Just like for fun.
Yep,
And
that's the predominant experience.
yeah, and but really, as therapeutic medicine, there's huge potential for human growth if psychedelics are applied, are administered responsibly and used. Used responsibly, yeah, and administered ethically and all that type of stuff. So when I was a kid, it was just like, yeah, let's eat some mushrooms, and still unbelievable experiences,
Yeah, that's 99% of folks.
Yeah,
Is
but
it makes sense, but yeah,
but
and
with ayahuasca, it was a shamanic healing experience, and that was transformative. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Still informs my transformed a significant part of my worldview, and informs it. It continues to inform it to this day.
Yeah, in Euro-American and centric type places, it's definitely something for sort of the well-off. And there's an interesting conversation that's starting to happen about, is there a way, or how would you? I mean, it's challenging because a lot of this is illegal.
Yeah.
But assuming there are legal avenues, it's like, what would that look like or mean to have this available for inner city people
Yeah,
and
sure.
disadvantaged people? It's like there's definitely no money to pay for it.
Yeah.
Let alone it might even be on the radar, but it actually could be a really valuable, powerful therapy for trauma. Who knows?
Yeah.
We don't know yet officially. And I think that's important.
I think so too. I think it goes back to what we were saying when we were talking about again the suspicion that people have of one another. I don't think people are suspicious of wellness. I think they are suspicious of the agents who purport to be, the masters of it, or the, et cetera. So there has to be a way to mitigate against people being suspicious of one another. And I don't really know how to do that. But
maybe there has to be leaders within the communities, ideally.
Sure.
So it's not coming from the outside.
Sure. And I do see hints of that happening, and I'm listening. I am hearing rappers talking about chakras more, and rap and rappers talking about Kundalini awakening and talking about ayahuasca. I'm hearing that just
wow.
popping up here and there, So I think that there's I think playing the long game on, I also, even though, at one point only the wealthy people had cell phones, now everyone does, because it's just it's a ubiquitous necessity, and I think probably at one point only the wealthy people had aspirin, and now every fucking buddy does, So I think, it's just, it usually the wealthy are the ones who create the infrastructure to and usually make these things the norm, over time. So used to be only rich people had the best weed. Now there's no such thing as bad weed anymore. So that sort of thing. I'm hopeful that more wellness options will be made available to the people who need it, over time. But it's not like it's just going to happen out of thin air. People have to advocate for it and speak up when they know the truth. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing to build bridges back and forth and the risks you're taking.
Thanks, man.
And as evidenced by just saying yes to letting me work with your own music, and look forward to continuing that. I just really appreciate this conversation. It feels valuable to me. Yeah,
likewise, man. And I appreciate the nascent friendship that we've got going here. And I think there are more intersections and more discussions to be had, both musically and personally. And I love what you're doing. I just want to the I Am Loving Awareness meditation that with a song with Ram Dass, that brought me to tears. I was sitting meditating with my wife, and I just love your music and what you stand for and your whole approach. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to continuing. Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers, brother.
Thank you, Born Eye, for joining us. I really enjoyed that. And please go check out the song that you are hearing in the background. This is Born Eye's I Can't Breathe, the East Forest Rework. And it's on all streaming platforms now. It's on his platform and mine, and he's wherever you want to find music. But I will put a link to him in the show notes. So always good to support. Thanks again for giving the podcast a review. It's easy to do. You can do it now. And thank you for everyone again who came to the ceremony concert online. More about that soon, but it'll be up for a few weeks. So you can still share it and see it on YouTube, youtube.com/East Forest Music. Wow, guys. Okay. There's a lot of words going on in the background, so I'm going to let you listen to them. You keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, just do it with grace.
Klux Klan back again like the home squad. Feel like the away team, advantages, no odds. Some of us take a pill, some meditate and chill, coping with the pain that America hate us still. Some of us take a pill, some meditate and chill, coping with the pain that America hate us still. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Game of Thrones, it's the King's Landing. Giving hell when the winter fell, then we swing cannons. With every moment passing and all of my distractions, feeling like the life I live is haunted by assassins. Spend a dark night under the heavens, enough to utter the question: am I alone or am I under protection? The King's Iron Throne, I alone flying home. Make them down on chrome, black palace, white castle, to the sky I roam. Silent poems whispered in a samurai's dream. Granted I seem battered by the battles I've seen. This is born eye music for sages through the unusual ages. Now they never question who is the greatest. What is profit to a man who gain the world and lose his own soul? Fofo, when that chrome go, then it's closed door. Afterlife, there is the reincarnation. King without a crown on some Ichabod Crane shit. Swore that I would rep it, though the Sorosites confess it. They don't really want peace, they just polarize the message. But what's the message? All life is precious. My team will represent it until all eyes respect it. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Peace. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, and so many others. We love you. We breathe for you. Bless.